This company's never been more profitable.
You mean hugely profitable?
I like it.
DavePorter.com presents The Profitable Cleaner, a podcast on commercial cleaning sales and entrepreneurship. The one podcast that's not afraid to discuss real sales strategies with real cleaning professionals that produce real profits and real results.
Hey guys, I'm super excited for everybody's been waiting for this guest here at the Profitable Cleaner, and I'm super excited to welcome Jessica Fialkovich. Did I pronounce that correctly? Nope. Did we lose Jessica?
Riverside's acting up, bro.
Can you guys hear me?
There we go.
Okay. Yeah, perfect pronunciation. Sorry about that. Yeah.
No, you're good. Well, Jessica Fialkovich, thank you so much for joining us today. You have very unique experience in what other guests that we typically don't get the chance to speak with, which is mergers, acquisitions, business growth. You're a podcast host, you're a business author. Let's just start there. Who's Jessica? What's your story? And tell us what you do.
Yeah. So you kind of summarized a lot of that, but my background is I've owned multiple businesses throughout my career. I think I've started 5 different startups now, sold 4 of them. But my niche really is in mergers and acquisitions, but specifically for small to mid-sized companies. So companies that are doing between like 0 and call it 50 million in revenue. That's what small to mid-size looks like in the US. And I own a couple business brokerage practices. So we're based in Colorado, Dallas, Fort Worth, and Las Vegas, and we help people sell their businesses. But really where my role is in the companies now and my role in the world is getting out there and helping people understand what their business is worth today, what the potential is for the future valuation of the company, and how to bridge that gap. Like, how do you prepare your business for sales? So if you do decide to sell in the near future or 10 years from now, you're going to maximize both the value for the company and the likelihood that it will sell.
Now, question for you.
Yeah.
We'll just jump straight into it if that's okay.
Yeah.
By the way, me and James tend to we'll just start throwing questions and whatever's on our brain. It's interesting that so I've been part of startups before, and when you begin your startup, like day one, you're already thinking, what is my possible valuation? What's my multiplier? What am I going to exit? How am I going to bring the top talent? Because you're building to sell.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like in a lot of different industries, you're not building to either sell or get acquired, or at least people don't think that way. Why do you feel like there's kind of like that knowledge gap of like every business will either die, sell, or get acquired, but it doesn't seem to ever cross people's radars. Have you learned any from that?
Yeah, and you're totally right, Angel. Like that's I'd say 95% of business owners never think about the eventual exit. And me and my podcast co-host, Andy Cagnetta, often say, like, you're going to leave your business one day. It's just, you're either going to walk out of it or you're going to be carried out feet first, right? One of 2 things is going to happen. One of those 2 things will happen, right? So I do think in the startup world, like when you do have investors and advisory boards and board of directors, like they keep you longer vision focused, right? They want a return on their investment. So like I was talking to a founder that I was considering investing in her company. And like my first question was like, what's the exit strategy? When's your plan to exit, right? Because as an investor, that's where I get my ROI, right? Is on the eventual exit. I think when we're running our own companies and we're not accountable to investors or a board or things like that, it's not that we don't know that an exit's going to happen. It's not that we don't know there will be an end. We just conveniently put off that important thought process to the future, right? It's that whole thing of, is it urgent or is it important? And oftentimes I feel like exit strategy in general, or thinking about planning for the future, preparing our companies for the future, is not urgent in our lives. So we can just tend to put it off and not think about it because maybe we don't understand it. Maybe we're scared of it, right? Or maybe we just think like we live in the dream world where everything's going to eventually come together and it's going to be a perfectly wrapped up sale, but we don't have to do any work to get there. So
for sure.
Yeah.
So kind of for context for people listening, I know your colleague, Roger Smolik. He was actually he was our business broker when we used Transworld to sell our small business a few years ago. Roger was awesome, spoke highly of you, Jessica. I started listening to your podcast, and here we are. I remember thinking that, oh, my business isn't sellable. That's like what like my roadblock was. How do you know if a business is sellable, especially when you're a small business and a service-based business, which we were, and which a lot of people listening are? Like, how do you know if a business is even worth something?
Yeah. And it's a great point, James. Like, I think we have two things that happen. We have, half of the audience probably sitting here thinking like, my business isn't sellable and it's not worth anything. And half of the audience, I guarantee, thinks their business is worth 1 million, 10 million, or $100 million. It's always a round number. It's never like it's worth 362,000. No, it's always 1 million or 10 million or 100 million. Right. So, but to your point of like, is a business sellable? And my answer is it almost always is. It's just like, what price is it sellable at? Right. So there are some situations where it's not sellable. Like if you're caught up in legal drama, you're doing something illegal. We've had people come to us who haven't paid their taxes in years, like that. Those businesses are not sellable, right? So as long as you're operating legally and you've built something that's actually doing some business, it's worth something. It's just, what is that value? I just got off the phone with the founder of an online business earlier today, and she's built a lot of stuff of great value. It's not a big business. Like, they're doing like $25,000, $50,000 a year in revenue, but it is valuable to a couple people that she's talking to, right? Now that deal's probably going to get done for $5,000 or $10,000 without a broker, right? It's just going to sell it to her friend, but she's getting something of value for that rather than just walking away. So it's almost always sellable. It's just, what price are you willing to accept for it? Versus I do see some sellers that are like, if I can't get $500,000 or whatever their number is, like if I can't get that, I'm not selling it at all. And my answer is always like, so you're willing to accept zero instead of getting 400,000, like, and that's where I think that's where as owners and founders, sometimes our ego comes into play of like just not listening to the market and accepting at least what we can get versus walking away with nothing. So,
it kind of reminds me of when one of my friends was trying to get me into life insurance. I feel like exiting your business and dying are two things that will happen. Like, you cannot avoid death, and something's going to happen to your business, something that you built. But funny enough, you're right, no one prepares to sell or exit even in life insurance. Or like, I always tell a lot of my friends are like, oh, I'm good with dying. And I'm like, cool, man. Did you already prepare your funeral? Like, whoa, let's not have that conversation. And it's like interesting. It's similar to the business, right? Like, they're building, but they're not down to have a conversation of, well, what if you want to leave? What if your kids don't want it as a legacy because they don't want that? They want to do tech or software. So that's interesting. What goes into having a sellable business?
Yeah, I mean, like, look, there's got to be some checks that you have to do and some things that make a business more sellable or make the transaction easier. Financial records are super important. So keeping track of your financial records, most buyers and bankers will look for 3 years of financial history at a minimum. And that means like your P&L, your balance sheet, your tax returns, making sure from a very simple standpoint that you have those documents, you filed and paid your taxes like we talked about. And then the cleaner that you can make them, meaning like it's just about the business and there's not personal expenses woven in, the better options you'll have for it. So it's like one key thing that makes a business sellable. A second thing that makes a business, I'll call it more valuable than others, is if it's less reliant on the owners, right? And I'm sure I've heard you guys talk about this on the podcast too, but as an owner, you don't want to be doing everything. In my keynote, and you guys will see this later this year, I joke that when we become business owners, we become chief revenue officer, chief marketing officer. We become like the chief sales person. And then, no pun intended, we also become the number one janitor in our business, right? We're cleaning up after employees. We're, sometimes like cleaning the bathrooms. And most people, when they're going to buy a business, don't want all those roles, right? They don't want to be chief janitor in a company. That's not why they're buying a business. So the more we can limit what we're doing in our business and be more reliant on other people makes the company more valuable. So there's a lot of other things. And you know, in our some of our preparation programs, we dive into what I call like 8 different value drivers, but those are the 2 biggest ones that make a company easier to sell and garner more money.
And for those of you guys listening that don't know this, get Jessica's book right here. That's going to prepare you for, I'm sure, some of those key principles on selling your business. Talk to us. Getting the most for selling your business. This is the book you wrote, and it says how to get top dollar, right? What inspired you to write this? I mean, you have such a unique perspective because you see all these, like, literally under the hood of all these different small businesses. What inspired you to write the book?
Yeah, I think it goes back to we see in our practice, we see a lot of owners leave money on the table. And it's kind of that flamingo effect where they stick their head in the sand and they're like, I don't want to, you know, I know I'm going to die, but I'm not going to plan my funeral, right? Like, I know I'm going to exit my business, but I'm never going to have a valuation done. Like, I'm never going to talk to somebody about like why someone would pay more or less for my company. And so I started a few years ago just keeping notes on like, what are buyers willing to pay for? What are they willing to pay more for? Like, when we talk about valuation, valuation is a multiplier of your earnings. So a multiple of EBITDA is the most common way to value a company. And we'll look at industries and we'll say, oh, in this industry, you know, the multiples, actually I pulled it today. So in the janitorial industry right now, the multiples of EBITDA span 1.2 times to 11.4 times in terms of deals that have gotten done in the last 3 years. So like, what makes one company a 1 and what makes another company 11 times EBITDA is really, at the end of the day, it's supply and demand. Like, how many more buyers can you attract to that business and make it desirable? The more you attract, the higher the multiple you're going to garner. And that book is about how to attract the most amount of buyers, right? It's just like marketing. It's like, hey, if you want to be attractive to any type of buyer group, right? You want to speak their language. You want to design a product or a service that's going to be appealing to them. It's going to solve their problems, right? And that's what I started keeping track of. It's like, what do these buyers want? And why are they willing to pay 11 times for some companies and only 1 times for others? And that's what the book's about. So.
And so some of those like 1.2 versus 11 point, I'm about to start geeking out and just hearing everything you do. 1.2 to 11.4, the difference could be literally the amount of people that are at the table.
It could be. Yep. It could be. And like, ultimately that is what it is. Right. So say, okay, let's take the 1.2 side. Right. And I don't know this transaction. Right. So I'm going to guess. Right.
Yeah.
But there is a quantity perspective. Smaller businesses do get lower multiples. And the reason for that is because there's less room for error. Right. Say you have $15,000 in profit in one company. You really only have enough money as a new owner to make like one, not even major error, like one minimal error before you're losing money, right? But if you have a company that's making $500,000 in net profit, you have more room for error. There's less risk in that transaction. So, and most buyers, they want to avoid risk, right? So in terms of size of the business, like there is a cap. Like, there's not a ton of buyers chasing multi-million dollar businesses, but buyers chasing businesses that make at least $100,000 a year up to say about $1 million a year, that's where the bulk of the buyers are. So there's a quantity side to it, right? There is a size that if you can get to this size, that's where most of the buyers are. And then there's the quality side of the business. Like, how is the business run? We talked about, is it owner dependent, right? Most buyers do not want it to be owner dependent. So if you have an owner dependent business, there'll be less buyers interested in it, right? If you, another thing I talk about in the book is marketing and branding, right? If you have a solid brand that's built and it's not about you, it's not, Jessica's business brokerage, like, more buyers will be interested in that. So ultimately, all these quantitative and qualitative factors come down to, there'll be more people interested in buying your business, and the more that are interested, the higher multiple you're going to garner. So
Absolutely. And it makes sense when you hear that, but like, if you don't know that, you just don't know that. Like, I remember knowing absolutely zero before sitting down and speaking with Transworld and then Roger. I want to talk about working with a broker. I hear there's a lot of ego in business, and I hear a lot of founders and owners say, I would never work with a broker, give them 10, 12%, whatever the commission is on that deal, because I know my business better than anyone. I thought the opposite. Working with a broker saved our ass, frankly speaking. What's the value in working with a broker that maybe someone just doesn't know?
Yeah. I mean, look, I'm biased, right? But my first company I sold through a broker. I was adamantly against it. And like, even to this day, I don't think he did a great job, but he found a buyer that like, I would have never found that buyer. She was not in my network. She paid, the business is out of business now. It's been like 12 years since we did that transaction, but she probably paid more than it was worth. And the broker negotiated a great deal where I got 90% cash down. I would have never been able to do any of that on my own. And so I think it comes down to a few things. Like I do hear from a lot of people like, well, I can find my own buyer, or I know who's going to buy my business. I hear that a lot. Like, oh, I know it's going to be one of these like 4 competitors or whatever. Well, we just talked about like, if you limit your buyer pool, you limit your value, right? So first of all, you want a broker that's connected and has a large database of buyers willing to also go out there to other buyers outside of his network, cold call, whatever, to bring as many offers to the table as you can. So you create competition for the deal. And then the second value really is like, look, each of us will probably, except for the serial entrepreneurs out there, which are few and far between, each of us will probably maybe only get the chance to sell one business in our lifetime. Actually, there's a stat that's out there, and it's we use it quite frequently from SBA data, that of all the businesses in the US, only 13% of them ever sell. The other 87% go out of business. So if you think about it, if you've sold a business, you're already in this elite 13%. And the likelihood you're going to do it again is pretty low, like statistically speaking. So yes, we're going to do this once or twice. We may be able to rely on some friends who've done it once or twice, or you can work with a broker who does it hundreds of times. They see hundreds of deal structures. They see hundreds of different hurdles that they have to overcome in negotiation, putting a deal together, getting through due diligence, legalese, all that stuff. One of my friends equates it to, deciding you're going to do your own heart surgery or something like that, right? You're only going to go through it once. You probably want an expert to do it. But I do think it does go back to ego. And I was the same way too. It's like, I don't want to hire this guy and pay him, 10% was, what we paid him, but it was worth its weight in gold. I felt the same way, James. Like I would have never found that buyer. I've never been able to negotiate that deal for myself. And I mean, we were in and out, I think, in that whole transaction in 90 days or less. So yeah.
No, that's great. Angel, sorry, I have one question to that point right there. Yeah. Can you talk to us about deal structure? I think this gets so overlooked. Everyone hears, oh, I sold my business for X amount. What's the deal structure? That's 90% cash down. Hell of a deal. Like, Talk to us about deal structure and how important that is, and how the number of the business being sold might not always be the number of the business being sold. Yeah.
So this is so funny, James. This is like my biggest pet peeve in life, is when you talk to founders and they're like, I sold my company for $20 million. Well, when you break out the deal structure, right, they did a mostly earn out deal. And I've heard horror stories of they only got like 1 to 2 million. So who cares? Like, who gives a crap what your valuation was? It's all about what you walk away with. It's about the cash in your jeans, right? So deal structure it's about what the company is worth. So we'll use this $20 million deal. That really irks me. And we didn't do this deal. I just heard about this through the grapevine. But so, in this $20 million deal, it was a 10% down deal. So it was $2 million down, and the rest was an earn out structure, which is can be the most risky structure for owners. And basically what it is I kind of equate it to like a commission plan for the seller, right? The buyer is going to take over the business. The seller is going to have no control over that business. And then they're going to get paid a percentage of revenue or profits over a 2, 3, 5-year period with no guarantees, right? So it's a really risky deal structure. And so in this deal, $20 million valuation, $2 million down, half went to his partner, half went to this guy. And then the buyers tanked the business. And they never got $1 after that. So yes, they sold for 20 million, but they only got paid $1 million each. Now, versus say we take that same deal and he gets offered $10 million, right? And with that $10 million, they're going to use some financing mechanisms. When I say you, the buyers, like the buyers are going to use some financing mechanisms to bring more cash to the table. So maybe they put 20% down in cash, they use 70% financing, and then the seller has to do a carry for 10%, which is another version of an earnout. It's just structurally a little bit different. So now in that scenario, yeah, the valuation is only $10 million, but at the closing table, that seller is getting 90% cash in his pocket. And if the other 10% goes away, it goes away, right? Now he's getting $9 million versus the 2. So deal structure is really important. And that's where a lot of people, I think, lose sight of what's important. When I'm talking to people, I say, what's your most important outcome? Is your most important outcome to be able to walk into a room and say, my valuation was $20 million? Or is your most important outcome to be able to spend the money of your valuation, right? And it's two very different things. And then we won't go down this rabbit hole, but then there's a whole different set of deal structures. Like, how is the deal papered from a legal and accounting side? Because there's another party in the deal that everyone forgets about, and that's the federal government, right? You do have to pay taxes on selling a business, right? So that's another area where, brokers and attorneys really bring expertise. But that's another big chunk of cash that can go away real fast too. Yeah.
So I guess my biggest question is the lack of knowledge. So like now I'm thinking all this stuff, right? Like I think I'm a pretty decently educated guy, but I'm not gonna pick up a book on merger and acquisitions unless I feel like I'm ever in a moment of maybe I'm gonna sell my business. But you're right, 13% only sells. So James, you're part of the elite, which is awesome. The other podcast ghost and speaker we just had he's in the elite. Is it that the other 87% of businesses are not qualified to be sold? Or is it that 87% of businesses have no clue that they could probably exit at one point and get acquired by a bigger company?
It's a great question, Angel. I think it's split. Like, I think there's, and I don't know how it's split, but say like half of that 87%, I think just don't realize that they can sell. And the easiest path of resistance is, draining the cash from the business and closing it down. That is the easiest exit if you look at it. So I do think there's a big chunk that don't know that they can sell. I think there's another big chunk that sets themselves up for failure during a sale process. By setting themselves up for failure, I mean, they don't give themselves enough time. Right. There's a lot of people that'll come to us and they'll say, I need my business sold like literally tomorrow or 30 days or 60 days. And in all likelihood, this is a process. Even like with the best brokers, best buyers, you're looking at a 9 to 10 month closing process. Right. So we'll just average it's a year, right? You need a year to go through the sales process. And then if you haven't been educated in how businesses are sold, maybe you need another year to prepare for that sale. So this isn't just a decision you can make, in your strategic planning session in December that you're going to execute this in 2023. Like you do need to give yourself some time. And I think some business owners are short-sighted in that. And then there's just life stuff, right? Sometimes things happen where we don't have that time. And I mean, unfortunately, we have worked with business owners who have passed away and we're selling it for their heirs. We've worked with business owners who are really sick and they don't have a choice. Then we've worked with positive stories too. Like they get a job offer they can't turn down across the country, or their spouse gets moved overseas and they get to live in Tuscany, right? There's stuff that happens. Like there's just life things that happen. And so I think it's, the lack of preparation and the timeline really hurts the potential of businesses selling. And that's where a big chunk of those don't sell too.
Yeah, I think that's very well said. Jessica, can you talk to us about, you do so many different things, like we said, podcast host, best-selling author, business broker. Talk to us about exit factor. Now, this just came to my attention here recently. Roger was pumped about it, and he doesn't just get pumped about anything. But I think a lot of people listening, exit factor could be something that might be of value to them.
Yeah. So thanks for asking so much, James. So Exit Factor, we've basically looped all of our expertise together in terms of mergers and acquisitions. And when I say me, it's myself over the 10 years or so experience I've had in the industry, but also my partner, Ray Titus, the founder of United Franchise Group. He's been in business for over 35 years now and done tons of transactions. So we've seen, and like you said, like the best part of our job, James, is we get to see all these different businesses, like hundreds. I think we've done over 600 deals, right? We hundreds and hundreds of businesses, and we've found these 8 value drivers. We found a system and a process of how you can get the most for your money or the most for your business, right? Over time. So what Exit Factor does is we determine what a business is worth today, what the possibility of the business value is in the future. And then we've developed a consulting and education program to bridge that gap over time. So it's a combination of one-to-one consulting and some DIY curriculum that you input into your business. And then we've tried to keep it super reasonable, right? So we know small business owners don't have huge budgets for this. They don't have budgets where they can hire exit consultants to come in for 5 figures a year. And our goal was really to make this accessible for everyone and not just the larger businesses, because we do feel like the small businesses is where we can really have the greatest amount of impact. So
I think
That's
it's
really
a program
exciting.
that I wish I would have known about. And I'm just fortunate that I found Roger that probably gave me some of what might be in that program. So sorry to
yeah.
cut you off there, Angel.
No. Did you? Hey, James, quick question. Did you actively look for Rogers, or did he just somehow popped up out of nowhere? Like, I'm
Actually,
wondering if.
Jessica, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll tell you the story. This might be good for Jessica to know since
Yeah.
I don't know, since it's your business. You guys have a guy named Gary that works there. He's kind of well known in the industry. I'm drawing a blank on his last name.
Gary Goldwasser. Yeah.
Um, there you go. Yeah, I believe it or not, I heard a freaking radio ad of Gary talking like, "Are you a stressed out business owner?" And it was like GaryBuysBusinesses.com. I googled it. Gary wasn't available, so they gave me to their worst rep, Roger. I'm just kidding. And I met with Roger in February of 2019, and he actually said, "Hey, you guys have something here, but you really need to do A, B, and C before I even give you a good valuation." We were on the verge of closing some big deals, and he said, "Call me when these 3 deals close, and you get an
Interesting.
employee in place." So he actually gave us a roadmap in February 2019. July 1st, 2019, we listed our business. And it was because of we did what Roger said. And we closed. We got really lucky. We closed in November 2019. So our process happened quickly. And I was working with experts like yourself, Jessica, working with a broker. We didn't know anything. So
That's
I
really cool.
randomly just picked up the phone because I was burnt out. I was burnt out, and I was unwilling to walk away without trying to get something. And we got more than we ever could have imagined. So we're
That's amazing.
forever grateful for Transworld.
That's amazing. Well, I'm glad to hear that. Gary has a radio voice. We joke with him all the time. We're like, we're not going to do any radio ads unless Gary's doing it. So yeah.
Yeah.
The
So
more I
it
hear
worked.
you guys talk, like, it's like a probability game at this point. Like, if I knew as a business owner, well, now I know. So now Jessica's gonna live rent free in my mind that only 13% of businesses actually exit. A lot of them other die out. Some other people just cash out the business. You're almost playing just a probability game, right? So you want to go and learn what your financial, how to put your financial records, how to make sure things don't run with you, and then have a team like a broker that helps you increase that probability, like that win ratio. They might not buy your business, but you're gonna go out full swing in, right? So that's
Yep.
really cool. Let me ask you, for those listening, again, guys, don't forget, she's gonna be an amazing speaker here at the Cleaning Profits Mastermind in Denver. What can people expect from a keynote speaker just like yourself, Jessica?
Yeah. So I like to have fun with my keynotes. So we're going to use an example company. We use case studies because I find if I talk about things that will apply to our own businesses, we tend to make excuses of like, yeah, but that won't work in my business or my industry or whatever. But if I give everybody a case study to work on somebody else's business, everyone can be very judgmental, right? And they can see the path very clearly. So what we'll do is through a case study, we'll look at a business that is getting ready to sell, and we'll evaluate what exit options that they have for the company, how they can increase that quantitative number, so how we can increase the value through the financials of the company, and then how we can increase the qualitative factor of the business too to make it more attractive to buyers. So we'll learn through this case study. We'll address those things: exit options, financial performance, and qualitative factors of how the business is run. We'll find out exactly what they did, and then we can take the lessons home to our own businesses.
Wow. All right. Well, there you go. Sneak peek for me as well. This is super exciting. I love when things are hands-on, and I think you're right, because if it's just theory, always theory or only knowledge, you make all these excuses, right? That come in the door. So that's really exciting. I have a random question. This is just me. Unless James, before I deviate us hard, do you have anything?
No, go for it, man. Go for it.
Okay. Sorry guys, my brain operates like something will come up, so I have to ask a question. So how important is there such thing as brand assets? Is that I know you said marketing and like, let's say my company is not worth that much. Let's say I only make $1 million profit. I'm breaking even. Like, I am not profitable, but I get more attention and views and I have a bigger community or a bigger market share, whatever, than my competitor. I just haven't found the right way to monetize it. Can you still get a bigger multiplier than a 1x or a 1-2, or is brand not that important when it comes down to the like an influential factor, I guess?
Yeah, it's important, and it can move your multiple from, a 2 to a 4 or something like this. But ultimately, the purpose of a business, I think we forget this as entrepreneurs sometimes. The purpose of a business is to make money, and not make revenue, but to make profit, right? So if we're not profitable, it doesn't matter how great our audience is. We haven't figured out how to make money in that model, because the business is a model to make money, right? So ultimately, the business has to be profitable. And if it is profitable, then things like that, like brand recognition, size of audience, all that stuff, it can move that multiple on that scale we talked about of 1 to 11 times. But if there's no profit there, it's very hard to get what I'd say is a good price that owners feel good about for everything that they've developed. The number one focus still at the end of the day has to be making money in the business.
If it's not making money, you could technically buy out without a multiplier. Like,
yeah,
so there has to be people out there kind of lurking for those businesses that are like, if I tweak 1 or 2, I can hit profitability, because of my experience, they're not getting it. They buy them at a cheaper price, I guess. There are people that do that, right?
There are people that do that. Yeah. There's people that will watch out there for companies, typically in an industry they're familiar with, and find companies that haven't figured out the profit model, and they'll acquire them for a fraction of the value of the assets only of the company. And then they'll turn it around. Sometimes they flip it, right? They'll make it profitable, and then they'll flip it and sell it for a larger return.
Okay, so that's something growing right now in commercial cleaning. So I'm glad you said that. We've been getting a lot of questions of like, can I grow through acquisition? Not buying anything from scratch, but like you said, like, I'm a cleaner. I have 300 employees. My competition has about 50. This guy has about another 150. Can I go and acquire them? Yeah, I guess.
There's a whole strategy to do that.
Yeah,
there's a whole strategy to do it. I know we all have a whole lot of time together today. Maybe that'll be like part 2, but growing through acquisition is kind of like the same model that private equity uses, right? So I mentioned that quantity of earnings drives your multiple too, right? So if you have $100,000 in earnings, you're worth less than a company that has $1 million of earnings. And there's these plateaus and multiples that you'll jump, right? So I use $1 million because $1 million is one of the biggest plateaus. If you can get to $1 million in earnings, you attract larger buyers. private equity, strategic buyers, investment buyers, and they often pay higher multiples for companies. So sometimes the game is that if you're going to grow through acquisition, you buy smaller companies for a lower multiple, you roll them into what's called a platform company, a larger company, keep rolling these all together, and then you get to this larger company, larger EBITDA, and then you exit for a higher multiple. It's essentially that's private equity's strategy, and it does not have to be limited to private equity. It's not easy to pull off, but it is a simple formula. So
That was super helpful.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Hey, Jessica. Sorry, Angel. I have one last question here, and I loved selling my business. Like my former business partner said, like the most alive he ever felt was actually selling the business. I remember like when the LOI came through, you're just like pounding the table. I still remember where I was when Roger gave us the phone call. Someone listening to this, small business owner, janitorial company, under $1 million, you can still exit. I want people to know that. I think people forget about that. Outside of buying your book, which we're going to link below, and signing up for Exit Factor and following all your great content, what's one thing that maybe a small business owner can gear up to do to sell their business or just even consider it?
Yeah. So I think the first step on our website, if you go to exitfactor.com/podcasts, if you go there, there's a quiz on there, and it's the quiz is my business sellable, right? So if you're in part of that group and you're like, I'm not really sure if my business is sellable, I think it's 7 questions, and it'll straight up tell you if your business is not sellable. If you're really worried about that, there is an outcome that will tell you it can't be sold. But it'll also tell you if you're ready to sell today, like go for it. And then there's a couple other options where you might need to do a couple preparation works in this area. So I think that's a good first step is, if you're just considering it down the road in the future, or you're even questioning it, just do that quick free quiz. And there's a report that kicks out at the end for it too.
Awesome. We'll link that below.
I have the final question, and no more questions then, James. You actually got in front of me, which was perfect, because I was going to say, do you have any final questions? No last questions before no? Cool. All right, Jessica, so here's the main question. We get, let's be honest, there's a lot of people that are going to be lazy, and they're like, you know what? I don't know about Jessica. I've never researched her. So they go on LinkedIn, they search you, they come in this podcast, and they go, let me see what she has to say, but they just skip to the end. Usually those people that hate movies and they just skip to the ending, like they got the whole, those people. Let me ask you, if they could only learn from you by what you're about to say right now, or that one advice enough to hook them to go learn more, what would be that one thing you would want to share with them?
I'd say you're going to exit your business, right? And the choice you have is you can control that exit, or you can leave that exit up to fate, right? And as business owners, we like control, right? So if you want to control the exit, you have to educate yourself and prepare in advance. And I'm not talking 3 months, 6 months, I'm talking years in advance. So in order to do that, you have to be connected with the right advisors. I'm more than happy to have a conversation. So if anyone wants to reach out to me, you can find me on exitfactor.com or on social media, but you will exit. You just decide if you get to control that exit or you let it control you.
Boom. That's how you drop some nuggets. Well, guys, we're going to link everything under here in the podcast. Connect with her. If you heard Jessica through the Profitable Cleaner, let us know. Let her know so that we can get a second episode on how to grow through acquisition, because now I'm really intrigued. So let's keep it going, and we're excited to have you on our Cleaning Profits Mastermind. Thank you so much, Jessica.
Thank you both. It was great chatting.
Have a great day.